It's all about overcoming imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome can be problematic thing, and it can be useful. So I'm very interested in allaying the difficulties and finding the possibilities. So that's our intention today. So my name is Sal Jeffries, and I am a human performance coach and an educator. My background is in psychotherapy, psychology, coaching. I blend knowledge and tools from neuroscience, from cognitive behavior, from yoga, from breath work, and from fitness. So I spend a lot of time looking at how human systems work, how we function, and how we function well. And I'm very interested in how the whole system works rather than only the thinking part itself. This is what we're going to cover, and we're going to go through fairly quickly. So make notes as you go. We can always come back on this. But what is it? Where does it come from? What does it serve? Very important one. How to overcome the limitations, which of course I think you're here for, and the tools you can use. And the tools, well, I'll give the final piece. So make sure we're ready for this one. Okay. First of all, we invite you to become present. I know what our minds and lives are like. They're busy. So take a moment. We're going to breathe. So breathing through your nose. And breathe out slow. Again, let your mind clear. Breathing in. Breathing out slowly. Taking one more breath. Breathing in. And a slow out breath. Now the mind is clear. Let's understand. Well, firstly, how do I see this and how does my work help? Well, I work with three spaces: mind, all the thinking, all the architecture, all the beliefs, the story that makes up a human, including myself. I work with the mood side of it, emotions, stress response, fear, anxiety, how we breathe, how we react, all those very human things. And as I said, movement. So that's from the subtle, like how do you respond under pressure? What does your physiology do? And activity and your voice, all the physiological components. So they're the three spaces which I look at when working with these challenges. What is imposter syndrome? As noted here, it's a belief behavior phenomenon, and it's really about self-doubt. When we doubt ourselves, we doubt our intellect, skills, we doubt what we've done is good enough. That's generally what it's found to be, and it's always around pretty much high achieving individuals, curious thing. Who? Well, it's all about not being able to internalize success. That it's fundamental. That's the deal. So pervasive feelings, nagging self-doubt, anxiety, could be depression. But all of it's about being worried about being exposed as a fraud, like, oh, I've been found out. And that your ability is not good enough. That's generally what we see. Okay, this is first identified in 1978, which is going back, still as old as me, and I'm very old, according to some people. But imposter syndrome is really this kind of description for a whole host of psychological emotional responses which act in behavior. This has been around a long time. It's become more prevalent now. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen this more after COVID. I think the sort of pressures of the world changing in the early 21st century has really shifted us. So it seems to be more apparent now than ever in my experience. Where does it come from? I get asked this all the time. It comes from a multitude of sources. Now, it really starts early years when we're very young. Parents, caregivers, a family, our school, all of those people and places, which as young little children, we look at and we think, oh, well, that's how the world works. So if it's happening in your family, you're going to get, kind of surrounded by it and taught by it to some degree. Society and culture, male and female, race, where you are in the world, what political parties are around. All these forces are part of, do they shape us in a way that's not helpful or helpful? They're all part of the mix. And life experience, what you go through as an individual, particularly from young, but as we mature as well. All of that stuff starts to become the component source of where we get imposter syndrome. It's really created then from, that's the origin, but it's created from identity or ego. So that sense of self. So if say me, well, I am Sal, and I'm a psychologist, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a mindset coach. All these identities I might have, but they're built on all our experience, both personal and professional. And it's the really important piece. And our wonderful brain system sort of absorbs in it and codes. So if we've had difficulties, it might say that it becomes who we are. Now, this is important. Meaning. Humans are meaning-making creatures. What it means is impactful. So if standing in front of a group of people and you have a massive bout of imposter syndrome, it might mean that you're not good enough, that you shouldn't be there. Who said that you should do this? And the meaning we make is the really important hook that most of us don't see. What meaning are you making that is part of the imposter syndrome? So hold that thought. That's going to come back into our unraveling of this. And technically, we'd talk about broken feedback. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. So it's when we start to overanalyze and we get this essentially a broken system where instead of being able to take feedback and clarity, we end up taking things on in a certain way that doesn't help us. Now, the common themes that you want to be looking out for, as all of us, over preparation is one of the general ones, like working too hard, putting loads of hours in, can't get it wrong, trying so hard to make it perfect. You might know that one. The flip is procrastination. Like push it off, push it off. You know that feeling? And you just don't get around to it. And suddenly at the back end of like the 12th hour, you're like, oh, I've got this thing to do. And then you rush it. Either way, both of these are a tell that there's a bit of imposter syndrome going on. So I hope that's useful to spot. And the signals are important. Now, most people tell me that they just want to get rid of imposter syndrome. And I say, firstly, pause on that because it serves something. And it's really important to ask, what does this serve? What does this unusual pattern do for me? Back to ego and identity. Our sense of self wants to remain. So if we believe we are not that good at something, it starts to become what I call psychological homeostasis. It's like we stay stuck. And there's a thinking bias called status quo bias, which we have well studied in psychology, which means we prefer to stay with what we know. The problem that we have here is if we've identified with being an imposter in our chosen field, then our identity remain until we give it good evidence to change that. So that's the first piece that keeps, kind of serves us staying in that space. And then safety. What do we need as humans? We need to feel safe. We are hardwired to be safe. Our brain's systems are pretty much 70+% focused on how do I stay safe? How do I survive? How do I keep out of trouble? So at some level, imposter syndrome is a way to avoid problems, avoid threats, avoid being judged. So this is why we want to understand this before we try and get rid of it. Because if you need to feel safe, then this is where we need to make sure that comes in. Okay. Now, the opposite of imposter syndrome is Dunning-Kruger effect. So there's a couple of psychologists who studied this whole phenomenon. They got really interested. And this is really interesting because there's an absolute opposite to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Absolute opposite imposter syndrome because it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. So I'm going to give you a little graph here. Now, take for a moment, have a look at this graph. Confidence on one side, competence at the bottom. Where do you place yourself? So have a look in your mind, sort of kind of pick a point on that graph. Where are you? Are you low in confidence or high in confidence or somewhere in the middle? And then competence, like what are you good at? What can you do? Would you say you're kind of low, medium, or high? Let's just get a mental note of that. Now, what we see is that anyone with imposter syndrome generally goes here. So they're actually technically here, right? So they're probably pretty good, even though they don't know it, but their confidence is very low. So we get this disparity. You have high competence, able to speak, able to do your job, able to handle yourself. And yet you don't believe it. You think you're not good enough and you keep doubting it. Our opposition, the Dunning-Kruger effect people, have got high confidence, like ridiculously high, too high. And they're actually not that good a lot of the time. So you get someone who thinks they're brilliant, could run a business, run a country, do this, do that. And actually, they're not that good at it. But their confidence is so high, they just delude themselves. The problem is if you go there, then at some point your competence will crash because you simply don't have the skill. Now, cycling back to imposter syndrome pattern, we have a problem, and I call it a belief ceiling. We get this we just can't get through that. You get evidence, you can't quite buy it because the belief ceiling is keeping you down in that low point. So this is where we want to do the work. Okay. This is an interesting cycle, and I think you might resonate with this. So the imposter cycle, like getting stuck in a loop, it starts here. right? So we've got fear of not being smart enough. You basically think, oh, I'm not that good. I can't do my job. I can't do the talk, all of those things. And then that goes into a maladaptive belief pattern. Like, see, I'm rubbish. I need to work harder. I need to not talk on stage. And the belief starts getting formed. It's maladaptive because it's toxic and unhelpful. Then we start doing lots of action. It's either hard work to prove and to be perfect, or it's procrastination to avoid that difficulty. But at some point, you got to go do it. Then we find ourselves achieving something, whatever that form of achievement is. And we try to do it so well that it's, back into that perfect space because, hey, we don't want to get called out as a fraud, right? The problem we get is then we hit seeking validation, seeking approval. And if someone says out of 100 points that one was wrong, then that bias goes in. It says, see, I'm no good at this. I'm rubbish. I'm whatever those damning statements are. We come back round into, see, I've proven I'm not good enough. I can't do it. However, if we can change this to what I call the authenticity cycle, we start at the top. We have trust inbuilt into our system, our mind-body system, that you're able to use emotional regulation where the fear is pulled down and you are starting to trust yourself and your abilities. And when you do, then you can start to create a new belief pattern. This is really important. This is neurological coding. You're literally changing your brain as you do this. When you have a new belief pattern, which could be, I'm getting better, I'm learning, I'm getting, my public speaking is improving every time I do it. Whatever it is, then that new belief pattern then starts to feed the action and the work that you do. And then you become more intelligent as opposed to reactionary. Remember, because you're emotionally regulated. Assessment. So we come out of the fear-based thinking, such as, will I be judged? Will I be caught? Into, how did I do that? I think that went well. Maybe say this masterclass. Maybe I felt this went well. Maybe I could improve there. And we assess. It has no judgment. So judgment changes for assessment, which is very important. And then external feedback, because we need to know, how do we get on? What was the experience of being with me or whatever that is? And we take that feedback with, again, a regulated self. Like, I'm happy to hear the good things. I'm happy to hear things need work on. So I can go back through this building my authenticity. It's a beautiful way of transitioning. So I'm trusting you're kind of resonating with this. Now, here's a big revelation that most people don't tell us. Everyone, me included, gets imposter syndrome at some point. What's important, I think, is that we just don't need it to go away. We don't need to get rid of it completely, but we do need to tame it. When you feel like it's stopping you, limiting you, holding you back, that's when it's like, okay, this, instead of being a little bit of anticipation, a little bit, I'm playing a bit out of my comfort zone, becomes fear. So taming it is the skill. But remember, if you have it and you have it well, it means you're playing just under your edge of capability. That, my friends, is growth. And that's where we always want to be hanging out. Okay, now I spoke about emotional regulation. Emotions go into action. Self-doubt on its own spirals negatively. I've been there. Like, I'm not good enough. I didn't do that right. We do all these kind of statements, don't we? We tell ourselves all this kind of internal drama and narrative. But the problem is that we don't understand that self-doubt is not the end of the process. Self-doubt plus discernment is powerful. So self-doubt means, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't be in that Dunning-Kruger effect. Be objective. But maybe I didn't do a good masterclass, or maybe I didn't do a good presentation. But let's check that. Let's discern here. Did I prepare well? Yeah, I did. Did I do the slides and check them 20 times? Yes, I did. Did I show up on time and give it my best? Yeah, I did. Okay, now I can use this to make even better next time without judgment. So if you find yourself in a place of self-doubt, add in discernment. And discernment means to intelligently look at things calmly. And I've said this calm a few times, haven't I? I'm alluding to the biggest thing that people need to do. We need to be emotionally regulated. If you feel stress, if you feel fear, if you feel anxiety, and you cannot regulate it, that changes the brain, it changes the body, it changes everything in your mind. Emotional regulation is the start point. Most of us don't do this. We need to create safety in the nervous system. It's a fundamental need for all people. So when imposter syndrome comes up, create safety. So right now, I'm going to give you an exact example, and I'd like you to do this with me. It's simple. You breathe in through the nose, but it's particularly to the lower belly, the diaphragm. And I'm going to invite you to breathe with me, breathing in for around about 4 seconds. It's a very slow out breath, out for about 6. Notice that's starting to soften. Breathing slowly for 4 into the lower belly and breathe out real slow, around 6 seconds. Again, breathing in for 4. Breathing out for 6. Slow, relax, calm. I'm going to invite you to do it 2 more times. And I explain that what you are doing is you are coding your nervous system. When we breathe diaphragmatically and breathe out slowly, the signals go up to the brain that say, I am safe. I am okay. And when you feel safe or safe enough, because there may still be a bit of anticipation, that's okay. But I'm safe enough to talk, speak to my boss, do the project, set up the new business. When I'm safe enough, I have choice. And also we know that the brain circuits that come online, one of them is very fear-based, which is reductionist. Confidence and trust is very expansive and creative. So we need to regulate. The 4-6 breath is the easiest tool I've taught anyone. We can give you bundles of science on it, but it basically changes you from a state of I'm not safe to I am safe. So 4 in, 6 out, breathe from nose to lower belly, and you will be starting to regulate. Then we line this up with meaning. And I said this at the beginning. What we make a meaning out of matters. We're meaning-making creatures, us humans. So we need to challenge any negative meaning. And you'll know it because it'll be such as, oh, this means I'm no good. Is that true? And is that true? It's a brilliant question. Every time you say it to yourself, such as a damning comment, like, oh, I didn't do good enough. Is that really true? And I almost guarantee in most cases it never is. You might have done really well, could do better. That's okay. So know your abilities. There are 2 ways to do this. 1, write them down, old school, capture it in your phone, capture it on your computer, write it down with a pen and paper. Write down everything you are good at, everything you did good in a session. And it's really important you capture it so you have a reference point. The second is to ask a friend and say, hey, what am I good at? Get that clear feedback. What am I good at? Because we often bias towards the negative and not towards the positive when we have imposter syndrome. So that's the tool number 1 that's psychological. Tool number 2, we need to separate your identity from your behavior. You as human beings are perfect. The job role, I'm a human performance coach versus I am Sal, they're different things. So if I don't do the best in my job, then okay, could I do better? And what can I learn? That doesn't mean anything about me as a human. I'm fine and perfect and completely contained as a human as I am. So when we separate that out and notice that your professional role might do some skill work and enjoy that, then that's a really important piece. So to summarize, we want emotional regulation, and then we want to challenge the meaning, get the evidence. And then we understand that this imposter syndrome done well takes us into edges of growth, and it doesn't want to hold us back. Now I invite you to take a moment, breathe in as we did, breathe out slowly, breathe in, breathe out. In a world that's going too fast, it's a real master who can slow everything down. And this is a skill I think we all need in today's world. And I trust you to agree with me. So I'm going to put contacts on here. I'll also leave them in the notes. And I hope you enjoyed that, that kind of, let's say, espresso version of going into imposter syndrome. But if you hit those points really well, emotional regulation, challenge the meaning with evidence, so much will change for you. It's wonderful.